Have you ever wondered why you think the way you do? Why certain fears, instincts, and reactions arrive almost before you're aware of them? You might assume your thoughts are your own, that the voice narrating your life is you. Yet there are nights when you lie in the dark, unable to quiet the mind that keeps circling back to the same memories, the same worries, the same ache. It feels as though something inside has taken the controls, spinning the wheel of your thoughts, replaying old stories you didn't choose to remember. And in those moments, you begin to question, if I am the thinker, why can't I stop thinking? The mind is not silent. It is a room filled with echoes, echoes of your past, your upbringing, your fears, your unfinished conversations. Thoughts do not appear from nowhere. They have roots, they have lineage, they have history. But most people never trace them back to their source. They simply live inside the narratives given to them before they ever learn to speak. Imagine a child watching the world without understanding it. The child notices which emotions earn warmth and which earn distance. They notice whose voices are allowed and whose voices are silenced. They watch how love is given, how anger is handled, how truth is avoided. The child does not analyze, they absorb. The mind learns long before you ever begin to think consciously. And the patterns formed in that quiet, wordless space become the foundation of how you interpret reality. This is why certain criticism wounds you more deeply than it should. Why certain people make you anxious even when they've done nothing wrong. Why certain relationships feel like home even when they hurt. The mind is not responding to the present, it is responding to the past, using the present as a mirror to reflect what has already been etched into it. Neuroscience tells us that the brain wires itself around what is repeated. Emotional experiences create pathways. Beliefs, once formed, do not simply live as ideas, they become filters. You do not see the world as it is, you see it through the architecture of what has shaped you. And so your thinking is not just thinking, it is memory, it is survival, it is self-protection. It is the story you were taught to tell yourself, a story you may have never consciously written. To understand how people think is to understand who they become, and more importantly, who they never allow themselves to be. And this journey of the mind does not begin in adulthood. It begins in the quiet, unspoken world of childhood, long before you even knew you had a mind at all. Have you ever noticed how some fears feel ancient, older than your memories? How certain emotions rise instantly, without thought, like instincts you never remember learning? That is because the mind begins shaping itself long before you are conscious of it. Before language, before reasoning, before you could ask why. Picture a small child sitting in a room where the adults speak in tones rather than explanations. The child watches everything, the faces, the silences, the warmth and the withdrawal. The mind absorbs patterns the way lungs absorb air. If a parent smiles only when the child is quiet, the child learns that silence earns love. If anger leads to slammed doors and raised voices, the child learns to shrink, to become small enough to not be punished by the world. If love is unpredictable, unstable, or conditional, the child learns to chase approval like food, because without it, they feel hunger in the heart. Psychologists call this attachment the earliest blueprint of the mind. The child does not decide who they become. They mirror what surrounds them. The brain learns emotional rules faster than it learns words. This is safe. This is dangerous. This is how to earn affection. This is how to avoid abandonment. and these lessons do not fade. They become the scaffolding of thought itself. Imagine a child reaching out for affection and receiving a tired sigh instead of arms. They do not understand exhaustion. They only understand rejection, so they learn to stop reaching. The child who is praised only for being strong learns to bury softness. The child who is punished for crying learns that vulnerability is a crime. And the child who grows up invisible learns to become invisible to themselves. The brain encodes these emotional experiences into neural pathways. They become filters, invisible lenses through which the world is seen. You grow older, but those early patterns live on, shaping how you speak, love, fear, argue, apologize, and dream. You think you are making decisions as an adult, but the child version of you is still whispering instructions from the dark corners of memory. The truth is haunting. The child does not learn who they learn who they are allowed to be. And so, without realizing it, the adult carries forward an emotional operating system they never chose. The thoughts you believe are yours may instead be echoes from the rooms you once grew in. These early imprints do not disappear. They simply put on a disguise and become the mask you later call your personality. Have you ever caught yourself saying, "This is just who I am," without really knowing where that self came from? You move through adulthood wearing a face you believe is yours, reacting to the world with habits you never consciously chose. But if you look closely, if you slow down just enough to notice the patterns, you begin to feel something unsettling. Much of what you call you was shaped long before you had any say in it. You grow older, but the lessons of childhood do not loosen their grip. They simply become more sophisticated. What began as survival becomes personality. The child, who once stayed quiet to avoid conflict, becomes the adult who always smiles, always agrees, always makes themselves small, so others remain comfortable. The world calls them kind. They call themselves easygoing. But inside, there is a quiet exhaustion, an entire life lived in apology for simply existing. The child who learned that love was earned by excellence grows into the adult who never rests. Every achievement becomes a step on a staircase that never ends. They are praised for their discipline, their ambition, their strength, but no one sees the trembling underneath, the fear that slowing down would mean losing worth. Their mind becomes a battlefield, every thought a demand to be more. The one who was punished for vulnerability now moves through life armoured. They are stable, composed, admired for their control. But the heart they guard so fiercely has grown unfamiliar even to themselves. Emotions become strangers at the door knocking, begging, denied entry. These identities feel natural because they were practiced for so many years. They feel like truth because they once protected you. But a mask that protects you as a child begins to suffocate you as an adult. You do not notice the suffocation at first. It begins slowly, in the quiet moments when laughter feels forced, when connection feels distant, when you no longer remember what joy felt like without effort. Neuroscience suggests that the brain turns repeated emotional responses into automatic pathways, shortcuts of survival. So the mind keeps narrating your life through old stories, even when your reality has changed. You do not question these stories because they sound like your own voice. But the voice is not you. It is a memory dressed as identity. There comes a moment when you begin to sense a presence behind the thoughts, the one who is watching, listening, sensing that something does not fit. The awareness is faint, like a distant light behind a curtain. And this is where the quiet truth begins to awaken. You are not the voice in your mind. You are the one who hears it. Have you ever wondered why certain thoughts return again and again, even when you try to silence them? Why worry has a rhythm? Why self-doubt has a voice? why a single memory can replay in your mind as if it's happening now. It is not because your mind is broken. It is because your mind is wired quite literally to repeat what it knows. Neuroscience shows that every thought is not just an idea floating in space. It is an electrical pathway, a trail carved into the brain. And like footsteps in snow, the more often a path is walked, the deeper the imprint becomes. A thought repeated once feels like nothing. Repeated 100 times, it becomes a belief. Repeated 1,000 times, it becomes identity. This is why the mind so easily clings to what it has known the longest, even when those thoughts are painful. Your mind is not trying to hurt you, it is trying to be efficient. It tries to save energy by using patterns. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called this the division between System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 is automatic, habitual, fast, the part of your mind that reacts without reflection. System 2 is slow, deliberate, intentional, the part of you that chooses what to think, how to respond, who to become. But most people never learn to engage System 2. They live inside the reflex instead of the awareness. And in that reflex lives the power of cognitive biases. You begin seeking only the evidence that confirms your existing beliefs, ignoring everything that challenges them. You anticipate danger more readily than peace, because the mind prioritizes survival over happiness. You mirror the thinking of the group, because belonging feels safer than truth. This is how the brain once protected you. But now, it may be how it limits you. Carl Jung called this the force of the unconscious, the unseen story behind your life. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The mind continues acting out old lessons, old fears, old wounds, even when your life has conned, changed, and you have outgrown the person you once needed to be. A woman who learned to be quiet in order to be loved now calls herself low maintenance. A man who learned to hide his sadness now calls himself independent. Identities born from pain become labels we wear as personality. What you have not examined becomes what you obey. The mind is a brilliant servant, but a dangerous master. And when these patterns go unnoticed, you do not live your life. You live your conditioning. And this is where the story turns darker, because when the mind continues unexamined, it begins to turn against the self that lives inside it. Have you noticed how your mind can become your own tormentor? How a single thought can unfold into hours of imagining disasters that never happened? You call it thinking, but sometimes it is something closer to bleeding. Overthinking often disguises itself as reflection. You tell yourself you're analysing, preparing, being cautious. But beneath the surface, your mind is reopening old wounds, replaying past hurts, rehearsing pain that hasn't yet occurred. The mind becomes a place where you flinch before you're struck. Self-criticism, too, wears a convincing mask. It sounds rational, responsible, mature. The voice that says, "Be better, try harder, don't embarrass yourself." But if you listen closely, the tone is familiar. It is not original. It is borrowed from someone else, a parent, a teacher, a voice from childhood that once held power over you. Shame is not born, it is passed down, and it settles in the mind like dust you learn to breathe without noticing. Fear begins to masquerade as realism. You call it being practical when you deny yourself joy. You call it being sensible when you reject your own hope. You say, "I'm just being careful," but the truth is, you are preparing to lose before you have even tried to win. The mind imagines abandonment, betrayal, failure, humiliation, not because these outcomes, are certain, but because the shadow of your past has taught you to expect them. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of you that remain hidden, unspoken, unaccepted. These are the rooms inside the house of your mind that you refuse to open. You know they're there, you feel their presence, but you avoid them because they contain everything you fear might be true about you. Your anger, your envy, your longing, your softness, your hunger to be seen. So you bury them, you push them down, and yet your life is shaped by what you refuse to face. The shadow leaks into your relationships. You pull away from people before they can leave you. You act distant with the ones who try to love you. You choose partners who mirror old wounds, because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar peace. You sabotage your own growth because success feels foreign and failure feels like home. The mind becomes a house where the lights are on only in the rooms you've already cleaned. You live in a fraction of yourself, while entire wings of your being remain locked in darkness. And the world, society, culture, environments built on image and performance does not teach you to enter those rooms. It teaches you to close the doors tighter. Have you ever realized how quickly the world tells you who you're supposed to be? Before you understand yourself, society hands you a script. Be successful, be confident, be impressive, be more. And without noticing, you begin to chase these expectations as if your worth depends on them. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that it does. From a young age, you are taught that value is something earned. Good grades mean approval. Achievements mean admiration. Strength means survival. And slowly, without ever choosing it, you internalize the idea that love is conditional, tied to performance, image, reputation. You learn to measure your existence in comparison to others, as if life were a ladder and your worth depended on how high you climb. Society whispers that success equals identity, so you chase titles, accomplishments, milestones. Not always because they fulfill you, but because you fear what it would mean if you didn't. Who would you be without proof? You are taught that confidence must look loud, that to be heard you must be bold, outspoken, visible. But for many, confidence is quiet, steady, rooted. Yet in a world that worships noise, silence is mistaken for weakness. Empathy, softness, vulnerability, the raw expressions of humanity are dismissed as fragile. You learn to hold your tenderness behind your teeth, to laugh instead of cry, to smile when you're aching, to say, "I'm fine," even when your chest feels like it's collapsing inward. The world rarely teaches you how to be real, only how to be acceptable, and productivity becomes the altar on which peace is sacrificed. If you're not working, you feel guilty. If you're resting, you feel behind. There is always more to do, more to achieve, more to prove. The mind becomes a perpetual motion machine, grinding itself down in the name of being enough. What's even more haunting is that this conditioning is profitable. Consumer psychology thrives on insecurity. You are shown versions of yourself that are never complete. So you spend your time, your energy, your identity chasing completeness that never arrives. You are encouraged to want, but never to feel satisfied, because a content person cannot be controlled. And so your identity slowly becomes a collage of expectations, pieces of the world glued onto your sense of self. You forget who you were before you were told who to be. You lose sight of the voice beneath the noise. But there comes a moment, quiet, unmistakable, when the weight of all of it begins to feel heavy, when the performance becomes exhausting, when the mask starts to crack, and in that moment you begin to realize the cost of belonging to the world was losing belonging to yourself. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and felt like you were looking at a stranger? Not in appearance, but in presence, as if the person reflected back at you had been constructed, layer by layer, from expectations, fears, and survival patterns you never consciously approved. There is a moment in adulthood when you realize your life has been shaped more by avoidance than desire, more by fear than by truth. This is where the mind, once a companion, begins to feel like a cage. Anxiety becomes a familiar language. Your heart races not because you are in danger, but because your mind remembers danger. Your chest tightens not because the present is unsafe, but because the past has not finished speaking. Loneliness begins to seep in not because you are unloved, but because the versions of you that could love and be loved have been buried under years of self-protection. There are days when you feel numb, like someone turned down the volume on your emotions. Not happy, not sad, just distant, suspended, disconnected, a ghost inside your own life. You go through routines, conversations, responsibilities, yet there is a quiet ache beneath it all, the sense that something essential has gone missing. And then there is the most silent pain of all, the feeling of never being enough. No matter what you achieve, something inside whispers, you could have done better. No matter how much love you give, something inside says, you should have given more. You live with a constant internal critic, a voice that points out every flaw and forgets every victory. You start to believe that if you were just more disciplined, more confident, more perfect, then maybe you would finally feel worthy. But the hurt does not come from the world. It comes from the stories the mind has been repeating to you for years. Stories you inherited, stories you absorbed, stories you never questioned. The woman who rushes through life, always producing, always proving, not because she loves achievement, but because stillness feels like failure. The man who avoids emotional closeness not because he lacks love, but because tenderness once led to pain. The adult who wears a smile not because they are content, but because they learned long ago that sadness must be hidden to be accepted. These patterns do not form overnight. They grow quietly like vines wrapping around the walls of the inner self until, one day, the path back to your own heart feels lost. But even the thickest vines can be untangled. Healing begins not by fighting the mind, not by silencing it, not by forcing change, but by understanding it, by gently turning toward the voice inside and asking, where did you learn to hurt like this? Have you ever tried to silence your mind, only to find it becomes louder? The more you resist a thought, the more fiercely it returns. This is because the goal was never to stop the mind. The mind was never the enemy. The real challenge is learning how to hear it without becoming it. You begin where all healing begins, with observation, not judgment, not analysis, just witnessing. Imagine sitting in a quiet room with your thoughts passing like scenes across a screen. You do not chase them, you do not flee from them, you simply watch. In that watching, something remarkable happens. You begin to sense the difference between the voice that speaks and the one who listens. This is self-awareness, the gentle return to the self behind the thinking. Some people find this through mindfulness, grounding themselves in the sensation of breath entering and leaving the body. Others begin with journaling not to write beautifully, but to let the mind spill its unfiltered truths onto the page, revealing patterns that were once invisible. When you name a thought, this is fear, this is shame, this is a memory, you loosen its power. It becomes something you are experiencing rather than something you are. Over time, you begin to notice emotional triggers, the places where your past rises to meet your present. A tone of voice, a certain silence, a disappointed look. These moments feel irrational, overwhelming, disproportionate, but they are echoes. They are the child within you reacting, not the adult. When you notice this, do not shame it. Sit with it the way you would sit beside a younger version of yourself who is afraid. This is the heart of shadow work, allowing the parts of you that were once denied to finally be seen. The anger you swallowed, the softness you hid, the love you never allowed yourself to receive. These pieces are not flaws, they are fragments of your original self. As you learn to sit with your mind rather than obey it, another voice begins to appear softer, quieter, almost easy to miss. It is not demanding, it does not shout. It is the voice that speaks in intuition, in stillness, in the moments when you are simply being rather than performing. This is the voice of the self you lost, the self that existed before fear became your compass. And when you learn to hear that voice, even faintly, something shifts. You begin to return to yourself, not the self shaped by survival, but the self born from truth. Understanding your mind is not the end of the journey. It is the doorway, the first step toward freedom, wholeness, and peace. And now, we step through that doorway into a truth that lives beyond thought itself. Have you ever noticed how thoughts move like weather? One moment, your mind is clear and calm. The next, a storm rolls in fear, doubt, memory, uncertainty, clouding everything you see. And in those moments, it feels as though you are the storm, as though your identity and your thoughts are the same, but you are not the storm inside your head. You are the sky it moves across. The sky is never damaged by what passes through it. Clouds, thunder, lightning, rain, they come and they go. The sky remains. In the same way, your awareness, the quiet, observing presence behind your thoughts, remains untouched, unchanged, whole. The storm is temporary. The sky is you. The mind was never meant to be your master. It was meant to serve you, to help you navigate, to remember, to imagine. But somewhere along the way, the servant became the ruler. The narrative in your head began dictating how you see yourself, how you love, how you dream. And because the mind can echo old wounds louder than present truth, you began living a life designed by yesterday. But real freedom begins the moment you notice the thinker behind the thoughts. The moment you step back even for a second and say, I am the one who sees this. I am not the story being told. Think of a child who once felt unseen. Think of how that child learned to become quiet or strong or agreeable to survive. Now imagine that child grown into an adult, still obeying rules written in a time of fear. When you finally hear the quiet voice beneath the noise, you realize you do not have to keep repeating that story. The past shaped you, yes, but it does not own you. You are not shaped by the world. You are shaped by the stories you choose to continue. You can choose to honor yourself. You can choose to speak gently to your mind instead of harshly. You can choose presence over panic. You can choose to open the doors to the rooms you've avoided inside yourself, not to relive the pain, but to retrieve the parts of you that were left there. Your mind is not a cage, it is a door. And every moment you pause, breathe, and witness yourself without judgment, that door opens a little more. On the other side is not a new version of you, but the real you, the one who existed before you were taught to doubt, defend, and disappear, the one who was always there, the one who is returning